The water splashes across Jesse Phillips' chest, soaking his crisp blue uniform. Queen Nora's compound eyes widen, her antennae twitching in apparent distress. "Oh, I'm so clumsy," she exclaims, mandibles clicking. "Please, let me help you." Jesse, a 28-year-old human male, stands rigid in the opulent throne room of the Nasset Royal Palace. He's only been on this alien world for 6 hours, and already he's drenched. As part of the first human diplomatic security detail sent to the insectoid Nasat homeworld, Jesse expected challenges. He didn't expect the young queen to upend a water vessel on him within minutes of their introduction. "It's fine, Your Majesty," Jesse says, acutely aware of the other Nasat nobles watching. Their chitinous exoskeletons gleam in the bioluminescent light, compound eyes fixed on the spectacle. Jesse feels exposed as the water causes his uniform to cling to his muscular frame. Queen Nora's attendants rush forward, chittering in their native language. The queen waves them back. No, I made this mess. I'll handle it." She approaches Jesse, her ornate royal carapace shimmering. "We must get you into dry clothes immediately. Follow me." Jesse hesitates. His training emphasized maintaining professional distance from the Nasset royalty, but refusing the queen's direct order could jeopardize the fragile human-Nasset relations. He follows Queen Nora, keenly aware of the hostile glares from male Nasset courtiers. In a private chamber, Queen Nora presents Jesse with traditional Nasat attire, a revealing, mesh-like garment that leaves little to the imagination. "Please change into this while we dry your uniform," she insists. Jesse changes reluctantly, feeling vulnerable in the alien clothing. When he emerges, Queen Nora's mandibles quiver. Her compound eyes dilate as she examines him. "How fascinating," she murmurs. "Human physiology is so different from ours." Over the next few days, Jesse finds himself in similar situations with alarming frequency. During a tour of the hydroponic gardens, Queen Nora accidentally activates a sprinkler system, dousing Jesse again. At a formal dinner with human diplomats, she knocks over a pitcher of Nasat nectar, necessitating another wardrobe change. Even during a private security briefing in her chambers, a faulty water pipe bursts, leaving Jesse once more in revealing Nasat garb. Each incident results in Jesse spending more time alone with Queen Nora, wearing less and less. He can't shake the feeling that these accidents are deliberate. The queen's reactions, her quivering mandibles, dilating eyes, and increasingly frequent accidental touches suggest a growing attraction. Jesse's human colleagues notice the pattern. "Watch yourself, Phillips," warns Sarah Chen, the lead diplomat. "We can't risk a cross-species scandal. The Nasat monarchy is complex. Queen Nora's interest could have galactic implications." Meanwhile, the male Nasat and the royal court grow increasingly hostile. Zixta, a high-ranking noble, confronts Jesse in a corridor. "You overstep, human," he hisses. "The queen is not for you. Know your place or face the consequences." As tensions rise, Jesse struggles to maintain his professionalism. But with each water-soaked encounter, his attraction to Queen Nora grows. He finds her alien beauty captivating, her intelligence impressive. Yet the stakes are impossibly high. One wrong move could shatter the delicate human-Nasat alliance. In his quarters, Jesse stares at his reflection in a polished chitin wall. He's caught between duty and desire, with the fate of two species hanging in the balance, and he can't shake the feeling that Queen Nora is about to accidentally spill something on him, again very, very soon. Jesse's gut told him he couldn't let this situation continue. The next morning, he requested a private audience with Queen Nora, determined to confront her about the suspicious accidents. To his surprise, the request was granted immediately. As he entered the Queen's private chambers, Jesse was struck by the lush, alien vegetation surrounding him. The room felt more like a steamy jungle than a royal receiving area. Exotic Nasset plants lined the walls, their vibrant colors pulsing in the bioluminescent light. The air hung heavy with moisture, and Jesse felt beads of sweat form on his brow. Queen Nora stood in the center of the room, her ornate carapace glittering. "Jesse," she greeted him, her antennae twitching. "I'm pleased you requested this meeting. There's much we need to discuss." Jesse took a deep breath, steeling himself. Your Majesty, A commotion outside the chamber cut him off. The door burst open, and a group of male Nasat nobles stormed in, led by an imposing figure Jesse recognized as Prince Kaztar. How dare you! Prince Kaztar's mandibles clicked furiously. You overstep your bounds, human! Queen Nora's compound eyes widened. What is the meaning of this intrusion? Prince Kaztar's antennae quivered with rage. This human has been alone with you far too often, Your Majesty. His presence here is an affront to our traditions and your honor. The other nobles chittered in agreement, their hostility palpable. Jesse's hand instinctively moved to where his sidearm would usually be, but he'd left it behind as a show of respect. Silence! Queen Nora's voice rang out, startling both Jesse and the Nasat nobles. Prince Kaztar, explain yourself. Explain. The prince's exoskeleton seemed to puff up as he spoke. I challenge this human to a duel in the Hydro Arena. Let him prove his worth or face expulsion from our world. Jesse's heart raced. He'd heard whispers of the Hydro Arena, but never imagined he'd face it himself. Queen Nora turned to him, her expression unreadable. Jesse Phillips, she said formally, according to our laws, you must accept this challenge or forfeit your position here. Do you understand? Jesse swallowed hard. I accept, he said, his voice steadier than he felt. Queen Nora nodded. The duel will take place in 3 days' time. Prince Kaztar, you may leave us. The nobles filed out, leaving Jesse alone with the queen once more. As soon as the door closed, Queen Nora's demeanor changed. Jesse, I'm so sorry, she said, her mandibles quivering. I never meant for this to happen. What exactly is happening? Jesse asked, his head spinning. Queen Nora explained the gravity of the situation. The Hydro Arena was a massive water-filled coliseum used to settle disputes among the Nasat elite. Jesse would have to face Prince Kaztar in aquatic combat, a discipline the Nasat had perfected over millennia. But I'm human, Jesse protested. I can't possibly... You'll have help, Queen Nora assured him. I'm assigning Grak to train you. He's a human diplomat who's lived among us for years. He understands our combat techniques. Over the next 3 days, Jesse trained relentlessly with Grak, a grizzled veteran with a deep understanding of Nasat culture. They worked in a specially designed pool, with Grak teaching Jesse the basics of water manipulation and aquatic combat. The Nasat use water as both weapon and shield, Grak explained, demonstrating a technique that created a swirling vortex. Your human physiology is different. You'll need to adapt, use your strengths. Jesse struggled, swallowing mouthfuls of water as he attempted to master the alien fighting style. But slowly he began to see how his human agility could be an advantage in the water. Between training sessions, Queen Nora visited Jesse in secret. She spoke of her struggles as a young queen, her desire to modernize Nasat society and forge alliances with other species. The conservative factions resist change, she confided, her antennae drooping. They see our interactions as a threat to their power. As the day of the duel approached, tensions on the Nasat homeworld reached a fever pitch. Jesse overheard Sarah Chen arguing with Nasat officials, threatening to withdraw the entire human delegation if he was harmed. Meanwhile, protests erupted in the capital city, with conservative Nasat calling for the expulsion of all humans. On the morning of the duel, Jesse was escorted to the Hydro Arena. The massive structure loomed before him, its organic architecture unlike anything he'd seen on Earth. Inside, thousands of Nasat filled the stands, their clicking mandibles creating a deafening buzz. Jesse, clad in a specially designed water-resistant suit, stepped onto the platform overlooking the arena. Across the water, Prince Kaztar emerged, his imposing insectoid frame glistening in the light. Queen Nora's voice rang out, officially starting the duel. Jesse dove into the water, the coolness shocking his system. He barely had time to orient himself before a massive current slammed into him, Prince Kaztar's first attack. The Nasat prince moved through the water with incredible speed and grace, manipulating currents to create whirlpools and massive waves. Jesse struggled to stay afloat, his lungs burning as he was repeatedly submerged. But as the battle raged on, Jesse began to adapt. He used his smaller size and human flexibility to dodge attacks that would have overwhelmed an Assad opponent. Remembering Grak's training, he started to anticipate the water's movements, using the currents to his advantage. The duel reached its climax as Jesse executed a risky maneuver. Diving deep, he used the arena's hidden currents to launch himself at Prince Kaztar. The unexpected move caught the Nasat off guard. Jesse collided with the prince, using his momentum to pin Kaztar against the arena wall. A hush fell over the crowd. Jesse held his breath, every muscle in his body straining to keep the larger Nasat immobilized. After what felt like an eternity, Queen Nora's voice echoed through the arena. The duel is concluded. Jesse Phillips is victorious. As Jesse released his hold and surfaced, gasping for air, the implications of his victory began to sink in. He locked eyes with Queen Nora, seeing a mix of relief and something else in her compound gaze. The human diplomatic team rushed to the edge of the arena, their faces a mix of concern and disbelief. Prince Kaztar emerged from the water, his antennae drooping in defeat. The other Nasat nobles watched in stunned silence, their previous hostility replaced by grudging respect. Jesse climbed out of the arena, water streaming from his suit. He stood on shaky legs, acutely aware that this victory was just the beginning. The political fallout, the future of human-Nasat relations, and his own conflicted feelings for Queen Nora all loomed before him, as vast and unpredictable as the waters he just conquered. Conquered. The implications of his victory sent ripples through the arena, the stunned silence giving way to a cacophony of chittering and clicking. As Jesse stepped onto the platform, his legs wobbling from exertion, he locked eyes with Queen Nora. Her compound gaze held a mix of relief and something deeper, more intense. The human diplomatic team rushed forward, their faces a blend of concern and disbelief. "Phillips, are you all right?" Sarah Chen asked, her voice tight with worry. Jesse nodded, still catching his breath. "I'm fine, just need a moment." Before he could say more, Queen Nora's voice rang out across the arena. "In light of Jesse Phillips's victory, I declare this matter settled. Let it be known that humans have proven their worth and honor in our sacred hydro arena." The announcement sent a fresh wave of commotion through the crowd. Jesse noticed Prince Kaztar climbing out of the water, his antennae drooping in defeat. The other Nasat nobles watched in stunned silence, their previous hostility replaced by grudging respect. In the days that followed, the Nasat homeworld experienced a surge of political and social upheaval. Jesse found himself at the center of it all, his victory in the hydro arena sparking intense debates about human-Nasat relations. On the third evening after the duel, Jesse received an unexpected invitation. A Nasat attendant, her carapace gleaming in the bioluminescent light, presented him with an ornate scroll. "Her Majesty Queen Nora requests your presence at a private celebration in the royal gardens," the attendant announced, her mandibles clicking softly. Jesse's heart raced as he read the invitation. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than a simple diplomatic event. As he entered the royal gardens, Jesse was struck by the otherworldly beauty of the Nasat flora. Massive, iridescent flowers pulsed with inner light, while delicate vines coiled around crystal structures that seemed to grow organically from the ground. Queen Nora stood in a clearing, her ornate carapace adorned with bioluminescent patterns that shifted and swirled. "Jesse," she greeted him, her antennae twitching in what he had come to recognize as a gesture of pleasure. "I'm so glad you could join me." "Your Majesty," Jesse bowed slightly. "It's an honor." "Please, tonight there's no need for such formality," Queen Nora said, gesturing for him to follow her deeper into the garden. "I wanted to personally congratulate you on your victory and to share something special with you." They came to a stop before a small, crystalline pool. The water within glowed with an ethereal blue light, tiny luminescent creatures darting beneath its surface. "This is the Pool of Unity," Queen Nora explained, her voice taking on a reverent tone. "It's here that we perform one of our most sacred rituals, the bonding of waters." Jesse listened intently as the Queen described the ancient ceremony, which involves sharing specially prepared nutrient-rich water between two individuals. "It symbolizes trust and unity," she said, her compound eyes fixed on Jesse. Would you participate in this ritual with me?" The gravity of the moment wasn't lost on Jesse. He knew this was more than a simple diplomatic gesture. "I would be honored," he said softly. Queen Nora's mandibles quivered in what Jesse had learned was a smile. She reached into the pool, cupping the glowing water in her hands. Jesse mirrored her actions, the cool liquid tingling against his skin. As they raised their hands to share the water, their fingers brushed. A noticeable shiver ran through both of them, the contact sending a jolt of electricity that had nothing to do with alien biology. Just as Jesse and Queen Nora's hands met, a voice cut through the moment. "Your Majesty, Phillips!" They turned to see Ambassador Krell striding into the clearing, his face a mask of concern. "I apologize for the interruption, but there's an urgent matter that requires our attention." Queen Nora's antennae drooped slightly, but she quickly composed herself. "Of course, Ambassador. What seems to be the problem?" As Krell began to explain, Jesse couldn't help but notice the way the ambassador's eyes darted between him and the Queen, a hint of suspicion in his gaze. It was clear that the growing closeness between Jesse and Queen Nora had not gone unnoticed. The celebratory mood evaporated as Krell revealed the latest development. "There's been a release of footage from the Hydro Arena duel," he said gravely. "It appears to have been altered to suggest that Jesse cheated to win." Jesse's stomach dropped. "That's impossible. I won fair and square." Queen Nora's compound eyes narrowed. "This is a serious accusation. Who is responsible for this manipulation?" Krell's expression darkened. "We're not certain, but there are rumors that Prince Kaztar and a group of conservative nobles are behind it. They see the growing alliance between humans and Nasat as a threat to their traditional way of life." The implications of this news hung heavy in the air. Queen Nora turned to Jesse, her voice filled with drive. "We must address this immediately. Jesse, I'd like you to accompany me on a diplomatic tour of our underwater cities. It's time to show my people the truth about humans and strengthen the bond between our species." Jesse nodded, his mind racing with the possibilities and dangers that lay ahead. As they left the garden, the glow of the pool of unity fading behind them, he couldn't shake the feeling that their relationship and the future of human-Nasat relations had just entered uncharted waters. Waters. Jesse's mind raced as he processed the implications of the altered footage. The fragile peace they had achieved through his victory in the Hydro Arena now teetered on the edge of collapse. He turned to Queen Nora, her compound eyes reflecting a mix of concern and perseverance. "We need to act quickly," Jesse said, his voice low and urgent. "If we don't counter this false narrative, everything we've worked for could unravel." Queen Nora nodded, her antennae twitching with agitation. "Agreed. We must present a united front and show my people the truth." Before they could discuss further, a commotion erupted outside the garden. The sound of shouting and the distinctive click-clack of Nasat mandibles grew louder. Ambassador Krell's face paled as he looked towards the source of the noise. "It's worse than we thought," Krell said, his voice strained. "There's a group of conservative nobles approaching, led by Prince Kaztar. They're demanding to see you, Your Majesty." Queen Nora straightened, her regal bearing evident even in this moment of crisis. "Then we shall meet them head-on. Jesse, stay close to me." As they exited the garden, they were confronted by a group of agitated Nasat nobles. Prince Kaztar stood at the forefront, his antennae rigid with anger. "Queen Nora," he bellowed, his mandibles clicking furiously, "you have betrayed our traditions by aligning with these humans." The accusation hung in the air, tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Jesse instinctively moved closer to Queen Nora, his body tense and ready for action. Queen Nora's voice rang out, clear and authoritative. "Prince Kaztar, these accusations are baseless. The human delegation has shown nothing but respect for our ways." But her words fell on deaf ears. With a sudden, swift motion, Prince Kaztar signaled to his followers. "For the good of Nasat, we must remove this human-loving queen." Chaos erupted in the palace corridors. Loyal guards clashed with the coup forces, the sound of chitinous bodies colliding echoing off the walls. Ambassador Krell was quickly separated from Jesse and Queen Nora in the melee. Jesse, we must reach my chambers, Queen Nora shouted over the din. There's a communication system there we can use to call for help. Without hesitation, Jesse grabbed the Queen's hand, guiding her through the fray. His combat training kicked in as he dodged attacks and pushed through the throng of battling Nasat. Queen Nora used her water manipulation abilities to create barriers, blocking their pursuers as they ran. They reached the royal chambers, slamming the ornate doors shut behind them. Queen Nora rushed to a crystalline console, her fingers flying over the controls. Jesse stood guard, his back to the door, listening intently for any approach. Suddenly, a powerful blast shook the room. The doors burst open, and Prince Kaztar strode in, flanked by his supporters. "Your reign ends now, Nora," he snarled. Queen Nora spun around, her hands raised. Water from hidden reservoirs in the room swirled around her, forming a protective shield. "You forget yourself, Kazatar. I am still your queen." Jesse moved to stand beside her, his fists clenched. "You'll have to go through me first," he growled at the prince. Prince Kaztar's compound eyes narrowed. "With pleasure, human." The room erupted into a fierce battle. Queen Nora wielded water with incredible precision, creating whips and barriers to keep the attackers at bay. Jesse used his agility to dodge attacks and strike back, his human physiology giving him an edge in close combat. As they fought, Jesse noticed Queen Nora seemed to be aiming her water blasts at a specific point on the wall. Following her lead, he maneuvered the fight in that direction. Suddenly, a powerful surge of water hit the wall, activating a hidden mechanism. The floor beneath them shuddered and gave way. Jesse, Queen Nora, and Prince Kaztar plummeted into darkness, the sounds of the battle above fading as they fell. They landed with a splash in a dimly lit chamber, the walls pulsing with bioluminescent algae. Dazed, Jesse pushed himself up, water streaming from his clothes. He quickly scanned the room, spotting Queen Nora a few feet away. To his surprise, Prince Kaztar was also there, looking as stunned as they were. "Where are we now?" Jesse asked, helping Queen Nora to her feet. The Queen's antennae twitched as she took in their surroundings. "An ancient bunker," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. "I've heard stories, but I never believed." Prince Kaztar struggled to his feet, his hostility momentarily forgotten in the face of this discovery. "This shouldn't exist," he muttered, moving to examine strange, pulsating technology embedded in the walls. As they explored the chamber, the gravity of their situation became clear. The entrance they had fallen through was now sealed by debris, trapping them in this underwater sanctuary. "We're stuck here," Jesse realized aloud. "Together." Queen Nora's compound eyes met his, a silent understanding passing between them. Whatever happened next, their fates were now intertwined in this hidden chamber, with an enemy turned reluctant ally. As they began to search for a way out, none of them could have predicted the ancient secrets this bunker would reveal. Secrets that would challenge everything they thought they knew about human Nasat history and test the limits of their newfound alliance. As Jesse, Queen Nora, and Prince Kaztar explored the ancient bunker, searching for a way out, a distant rumble caught their attention. The walls shuddered, and water began to seep through tiny cracks in the structure. "We need to find an exit fast," Jesse said, his voice tight with urgency. Queen Nora's antennae twitched as she focused on the vibrations. "There's a disturbance above. It feels like combat." Prince Kaztar's mandibles clicked in frustration. "My followers must have engaged your loyalists, Your Majesty. This conflict has escalated beyond our control." As if in response to his words, a section of the ceiling collapsed, sending a torrent of water cascading into the chamber. The three of them were swept off their feet, tumbling in the sudden current. Jesse fought against the rush of water, his lungs burning as he struggled to reach the surface. He broke through, gasping for air, and saw Queen Nora and Prince Kaztar nearby, their carapaces glistening in the dim light. The flood had opened a passage back to the upper levels of the palace. They swam through the opening, emerging into the chaos of a full-scale battle. Nasat, loyal to the Queen, clashed with coup supporters, water manipulation abilities on full display as combatants hurled torrents at each other. Ambassador Krell spotted them and rushed over, dodging jets of water. "Your Majesty, thank the stars you're alive. The situation has deteriorated rapidly. Before Queen Nora could respond, a booming voice cut through the din. Enough! It was General Zixlar, a decorated Nasat warrior known for his exceptional water manipulation skills. He stood at the head of a group of hardline coup leaders, his imposing figure drawing all eyes. This civil strife will tear our society apart, Zixlar declared. We demand an end to this human-loving reign. Queen Nora stepped forward, her bearing regal despite her soaked appearance. And I demand an end to this short-sighted rebellion. There is a better way to perseverance our differences. She raised her voice, addressing all present. I propose a traditional Nasat water duel to settle this conflict. If our side wins, the coup ends, and we continue to build our alliance with the humans. If we lose, I will step down. A murmur rippled through the crowd. General Zixlar's antennae twitched as he considered the offer. Very well, he said finally. I will be the champion for our side. Who will represent you, Your Majesty? All eyes turned to Queen Nora. She surveyed her allies, her gaze lingering on Prince Kestar before settling on Jessie. I choose Jessie as our champion, she announced. A collective gasp echoed through the chamber. Jessie's eyes widened in surprise. Me? He whispered. Queen Nora nodded. Yes, you've proven yourself in the Hydro Arena before. More importantly, you represent the ancient alliance between humans and Nasat that we seek to renew. Jessie swallowed hard, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He met Queen Nora's compound eyes and saw the trust there. I accept, he said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. The Hydro Arena was quickly prepared for the duel. The water level was raised, and various obstacles were added to create a complex battleground. Jessie donned a modified version of his water-resistant suit, now enhanced with Nasat technology to improve his aquatic abilities. As he entered the arena, Jessie saw General Zixlar on the opposite side, resplendent in full Nasat battle armor. The general's mandibles clicked in anticipation, his compound eyes fixed on Jessie with predatory focus. Queen Nora approached Jessie before the duel began. Remember your training with Grak, she said softly. And remember, you carry the hopes of both our species with you. Jessie nodded, his throat too tight to speak. He stepped into the water, feeling its cool embrace as he submerged himself. A horn sounded, signaling the start of the duel. General Zixlar wasted no time, immediately demonstrating his superior water manipulation skills. He created massive waves that crashed towards Jessie, followed by swirling whirlpools designed to disorient and submerge him. Jessie struggled to stay afloat, relying on his human agility and the training he had received. He ducked and weaved, narrowly avoiding the general's attacks. The crowd watched in tense silence as Jessie was pushed to his limits. But as the battle raged on, Jessie began to adapt. He realized his smaller size and different lung capacity allowed him to dive deeper and hold his breath longer than the Nasat general. Jessie used this to his advantage, diving beneath the surface to evade attacks and launch surprise counterstrikes. He emerged from the depths, catching General Zixlar off guard with a swift kick to the carapace. The general stumbled, his concentration broken momentarily. Jessie pressed his advantage, using the water currents to propel himself forward and land several more hits. The tide of the battle slowly turned in Jessie's favor. His human physiology, once seen as a disadvantage, proved to be an unexpected asset in the aquatic environment. The spectators watched in amazement as Jessie held his own against the decorated Nasat warrior. General Zixlar, growing desperate, attempted a forbidden technique. He tried to manipulate the water inside Jessie's body, causing him to double over in pain. Queen Nora immediately called foul, but before she could intervene, an unexpected ally came to Jessie's aid. Prince Kestar, in a shocking turn of events, dove into the arena. He used his own water manipulation abilities to counter Zixlar's attack, freeing Jessie from its grip. The human and the Nasat prince found themselves fighting side by side, their movements synchronized as if they had trained together for years. Their unexpected alliance overwhelmed General Zixlar. Jessie's agility combined with Prince Kestar's mastery of water manipulation proved to be an unbeatable combination. With a final coordinated assault, they forced the general to yield. As Jessie and Prince Kestar emerged from the water, Victorious, the arena erupted in a cacophony of clicks and whistles, the Nasat equivalent of cheers. Queen Nora rushed to embrace them both, her antennae quivering with emotion. "You've done it," she said, her voice filled with pride and relief. "You've saved our alliance and our future." Jesse, exhausted but elated, looked around at the celebrating Nasat. He caught sight of Ambassador Krell, who gave him a nod of approval. As the implications of their victory began to sink in, Jesse realized that this was just the beginning of a new chapter in human-Nasat relations, one that he would play a central role in shaping. The celebration of Jesse and Prince Kaztar's victory was short-lived. As the crowd's excitement began to subside, Ambassador Krell approached Jesse with a solemn expression. "Jesse, a word in private, please," Krell said, his voice low and urgent. They moved to a quiet corner of the arena, away from the still chattering Nasat. Krell's antennae twitched nervously as he spoke. "I've received orders from Earth. They want you to return immediately." Jesse felt as if he'd been doused with ice water. "What? But why? We've just achieved a major breakthrough here." Krell shook his head. "I don't have all the details, but it seems Earth Command is concerned about your closeness to Queen Nora. They fear it might compromise your objectivity." Before Jesse could respond, Queen Nora glided over, her compound eyes bright with triumph. She sensed the tension between the two humans and tilted her head inquisitively. "Is everything all right?" Jesse opened his mouth to speak, but Krell cut him off. "Your Majesty, I was just informing Jesse of some developments from Earth." Queen Nora's antennae quivered, picking up on the unspoken conflict. She looked from Jesse to Krell, then straightened her posture, every inch the regal monarch. "Ambassador Krell, I believe it's time we took a bold step forward in our alliance." Krell blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean, Your Majesty?" "I propose a diplomatic mission to Earth," Queen Nora announced, her voice carrying across the arena. The nearby Nasat fell silent, all attention focused on their queen. "I will personally represent the Nasat people to negotiate a more permanent alliance between our species." A ripple of clicks and whistles spread through the crowd. Ambassador Krell's jaw dropped. "Your Majesty, that's unprecedented. The logistics alone would be—" "Challenging, yes," Queen Nora interrupted, "but not impossible. We've already proven that our species can work together effectively." She gestured to Jesse and Prince Kaztar. "This is the logical next step." The Nasat Council members, who had gathered nearby, began chittering amongst themselves. Prince Kaztar, still dripping from the arena, stepped forward. "Your Majesty, while I admire your vision, is it wise to leave our world at such a delicate time?" Queen Nora turned to him, her gaze steady. "Prince Kaztar, you've shown today that you're capable of putting aside our differences for the greater good. I'm trusting you to help maintain stability here while I'm gone." Kaztar's antennae twitched in surprise, but he nodded solemnly. Ambassador Krell, having regained his composure, cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, if you're serious about this, we'll need to make immediate arrangements, and we'll need to assign you a personal guard who understands both human and Nasat cultures." Queen Nora's compound eyes fixed on Jesse. "I believe we have the perfect candidate right here." Jesse's heart raced. The thought of returning to Earth with Queen Nora both exhilarated and terrified him. He noticed Krell's frown deepening and knew the ambassador wasn't pleased with this turn of events. "Your Majesty," Krell began, "while Jesse has proven himself capable, I'm not sure if—" "Ambassador," Queen Nora cut in, her tone brooking no argument. "Jesse has repeatedly demonstrated his ability to protect me and navigate the complexities of our two cultures. I insist on his appointment as my personal guard for this mission." Krell's shoulders sagged slightly in defeat. "Very well, Your Majesty. I'll make the necessary arrangements." As the news spread, the arena buzzed with excitement. Jesse found himself at the center of a whirlwind of activity as preparations began immediately. Equipment was gathered, communications were established with Earth, and a flurry of diplomatic messages flew back and forth. Amidst the chaos, Dr. Liana Sullivan arrived. a human xenobiologist specializing in interspecies biology. She set up a temporary medical bay to conduct examinations on Queen Nora and her entourage. Jesse accompanied Queen Nora to her examination, standing guard outside the makeshift medical room. He couldn't help but overhear Dr. Sullivan's excited exclamations as she conducted her tests. "This is fascinating," Dr. Sullivan's voice carried through the thin walls. "Your Majesty, there are some surprising similarities between human and Nasat biology. The structure of your respiratory system, for instance. It's almost as if—" Jesse leaned closer, intrigued, but at that moment a commotion down the hallway drew his attention. A group of Nasat were arguing loudly, their antennae waving agitatedly. He hesitated, torn between his curiosity about Dr. Sullivan's findings and his duty to maintain order. With a last glance at the medical room door, Jesse moved towards the disturbance, ready to diffuse any potential conflicts. As he approached the arguing group, he realized that Queen Nora's unprecedented decision had sparked heated debates among her people. The preparations for the Earth mission were underway, but it was clear that this journey would be fraught with challenges, both diplomatic and personal. Jesse steeled himself for what lay ahead, knowing that his role as Queen Nora's protector was about to become more complex than ever before. The journey to Earth was a whirlwind of preparations and anticipation. As their ship entered Earth's atmosphere, Jesse stood beside Queen Nora, watching her compound eyes widen at the sight of the blue planet below. The delegation touched down in New York City, where they were immediately swept into a series of welcome ceremonies and diplomatic meetings. On the third day of their visit, the delegation was scheduled to tour a state-of-the-art aquarium, specially modified to accommodate both human and Nasat physiology. As they approached the massive glass and steel structure, Jesse couldn't help but feel a twinge of nervousness. He'd been on high alert since their arrival, acutely aware of his responsibility to protect Queen Nora in this unfamiliar environment. The aquarium's director, a tall woman with a shock of white hair, greeted them at the entrance. "Welcome, Your Majesty, honored guests. We've prepared a truly unique experience for you today." As they entered the main atrium, Queen Nora's antennae quivered with excitement. Massive tanks lined the walls, filled with a dizzying array of marine life. Schools of brightly colored fish darted through coral reefs, while sleek sharks glided ominously overhead. "Fascinating," Queen Nora clicked, her voice filled with wonder. "The diversity of your oceans is remarkable. It reminds me of the deep trenches on our homeworld." Jesse watched her with a smile, touched by her genuine enthusiasm. He'd never seen her so animated, her usual regal composure giving way to childlike curiosity. As they moved through the exhibits, Dr. Liana Sullivan provided running commentary on the various species they encountered. Jesse noticed several members of the aquarium staff eyeing the Nasat delegation with barely concealed curiosity, and in some cases, suspicion. Their tour culminated at a large touch pool exhibit, where visitors could interact directly with various marine creatures. The pool had been specially designed to accommodate Nasat physiology, with multiple sections of varying salinity and temperature. "Your Majesty," the director said, gesturing to the pool, "would you care to experience our touch pool?" Queen Nora nodded eagerly, stepping forward to the edge of the pool. Jesse moved closer, his protective instincts on high alert despite the seemingly benign setting. As the Queen dipped her appendages into the water, her body visibly relaxed, clearly enjoying the familiar aquatic environment. Jesse allowed himself to relax slightly, scanning the room out of habit. Suddenly, Queen Nora let out a sharp cry of distress. Her body stiffened, and her exoskeleton began to discolor rapidly. Jesse's training kicked in immediately. Without hesitation, he plunged his arms into the water and lifted the Queen out of the pool, cradling her against his chest. "Something's wrong with the water," he shouted, his eyes darting around the room. "We need a clean source now." The room erupted into chaos. Alarms blared as security protocols activated, and the aquarium staff scrambled to respond. Dr. Sullivan pushed through the crowd, her face etched with concern. "This way," she called, gesturing toward a back corridor. "There's an isolation tank with purified water." Jesse followed her, his arms tightening protectively around Queen Nora. He could feel her body trembling against his, her exoskeleton hot to the touch. As they raced through the corridors, Jesse's mind whirled. This was no accident. Someone had deliberately tampered with the water. They burst into a small room dominated by a large, cylindrical tank. Without hesitation, Jesse waded into the water, still holding Queen Nora. As he gently lowered her into the purified liquid, their bodies pressed close together. For a moment, their eyes locked, and Jesse felt a jolt of electricity pass between them. Dr. Sullivan's voice broke the moment. "Her vitals are stabilizing," she reported, studying a handheld scanner. "But she's not out of danger yet. This exposure has triggered an accelerated molting process." Jesse's eyes hardened. "I need to find who's responsible for this," he said, his voice tight with anger. "Can you stay with her?" Dr. Sullivan nodded, and Jesse turned to leave. As he reached the door, he heard Queen Nora's voice, weak but determined. "Be careful, Jesse," she clicked softly. He met her gaze once more, nodding firmly before racing out of the room. In the main atrium, he found Ambassador Krell coordinating with Earth security forces. "Jesse," Krell called out, "what's the situation?" "The Queen is stable for now, but someone tampered with the touch pool," Jesse reported. "I'm going to help track down the saboteurs." Krell's antennae twitched with worry. "Be careful. We can't afford another incident." Jesse nodded grimly and joined the security team. As they moved through the aquarium's back areas, he drew on his combat training and knowledge of human tactics. The facility's layout was complex, with numerous maintenance corridors and access points. As they approached the filtration plant, Jesse heard muffled voices. He signaled to the team to halt, then crept forward silently. Peering around a corner, he saw a group of men huddled around a control panel. One of them, a tall man with a scar across his cheek, was speaking urgently. "We need to get out of here now," the scarred man hissed. "The plan's blown." Jesse recognized him immediately. Marcus Graves, a former security officer who'd been discharged for his extreme anti-alien views. Anger surged through Jesse as he realized the extent of the betrayal. Without waiting for backup, Jesse burst into the room. "Freeze!" he shouted, his voice echoing off the metal walls. Graves spun around, his eyes widening in recognition. "You!" he snarled, lunging forward. The two men collided in a fury of fists and elbows. Jesse's recent combat experiences on the Nassat homeworld had honed his skills, but Graves was a formidable opponent. They grappled amidst the complex piping system, each seeking an advantage. As they fought, Jesse's mind raced, searching for a way to end this quickly. His eyes landed on a large pressure gauge, and suddenly he had an idea. Drawing on his knowledge of water systems gained from his time with the Nassat, Jesse maneuvered Graves towards a specific section of piping. With a swift movement, Jesse reached out and yanked a large lever. Instantly, a torrent of water burst from the pipes, catching Graves and his accomplices off guard. The pressure knocked them off their feet, slamming them against the far wall. As the security team rushed in to apprehend the stunned saboteurs, Jesse leaned against a nearby tank, catching his breath. His thoughts immediately turned to Queen Nora. He had neutralized the threat, but at what cost to her? Rushing back to the isolation room, Jesse found Dr. Sullivan monitoring Queen Nora's condition closely. The Queen floated in the tank, her exoskeleton now a pale, translucent color. "How is she?" Jesse asked, his voice tight with concern. Dr. Sullivan looked up, her eyes wide with excitement despite the tense situation. "Jesse, you won't believe this. The Queen's new exoskeleton, it's adapting to Earth's atmosphere. If my readings are correct, she might be able to spend extended periods out of water once the molting is complete." Jesse's gaze locked onto Queen Nora's still form in the tank. As he watched, he could almost see the subtle changes occurring in her exoskeleton. The implications of this development were staggering, potentially reshaping the future of human-Nassat relations. But for now, all Jesse cared about was Queen Nora's recovery. He pulled up a chair next to the tank, prepared to stand vigil for as long as necessary. As he settled in, he noticed Queen Nora's antennae twitch slightly, as if sensing his presence. In that moment, despite the chaos of the day and the uncertainties that lay ahead, Jesse felt a profound sense of connection to the alien queen. Whatever challenges they would face them together. Together. As Jesse watched Queen Nora's slow transformation, he felt a mix of hope and trepidation about what the future held for them both. Over the next few days, Queen Nora's new exoskeleton continued to develop and harden. When she finally emerged from the isolation tank, her appearance was breathtaking. Her once dark, chitinous shell now shimmered with iridescent hues that seemed to shift and change in different lights. Dr. Sullivan conducted a series of tests, her excitement growing with each new discovery. "It's remarkable," she explained to Jesse and Ambassador Krell. "Queen Nora's new exoskeleton has adapted to allow her to spend extended periods out of water while on Earth. This could revolutionize our diplomatic relations." As news of the Queen's transformation spread, plans were quickly put into motion for a gala dinner at the United Earth headquarters. The event was designed to showcase the strengthening alliance between humans and Nasat, with Queen Nora's newfound ability taking center stage. On the evening of the gala, Jesse stood outside Queen Nora's quarters, his posture rigid as he performed his duties as her personal guard. When the door slid open, he found himself momentarily stunned by the sight of her. Queen Nora's new exoskeleton gleamed under the soft lighting, creating an almost ethereal glow around her. Jesse swallowed hard, suddenly aware of a subtle, alluring scent emanating from her. "Your Majesty," he managed, bowing slightly. "You look incredible." Queen Nora's antennae twitched in what Jesse had come to recognize as a sign of pleasure. "Thank you, Jesse," she clicked softly. "Shall we proceed to the gala?" As they made their way through the corridors, Jesse found himself hyper-aware of Queen Nora's presence. The scent that surrounded her seemed to grow stronger, clouding his thoughts and making it difficult to focus on his surroundings. They entered the Grand Hall of the United Earth headquarters, where hundreds of guests from both species had gathered. A hush fell over the crowd as Queen Nora made her entrance, her iridescent form capturing everyone's attention. President Rossi stepped forward to greet them, his eyes widening slightly as he took in the Queen's new appearance. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing deeply, "welcome to this celebration of our growing alliance." As the evening progressed, Jesse struggled to maintain his composure. He found himself constantly scanning the room for threats, his protective instincts heightened by his growing awareness of Queen Nora. He noticed several human guests seemed similarly affected, their gazes lingering on the Queen longer than was strictly polite. During a lull in the proceedings, Dr. Sullivan pulled Jesse aside, her expression concerned. "Jesse, I need to warn you about something," she said in a low voice. "My latest tests show that Queen Nora's adaptation has also enhanced her pheromone production. It's having a strong effect on humans, particularly those in close proximity to her." Jesse nodded, suddenly understanding his own reactions. "Is it dangerous?" he asked. "Not physically," Dr. Sullivan replied, "but it could complicate things diplomatically. Just be aware of it." As Jesse rejoined Queen Nora, he noticed a commotion near the entrance. A group of protesters had somehow breached security and were now pushing their way into the hall, waving signs denouncing the Human-Nasat Alliance. "Death to the bug lovers," one of them shouted, his face contorted with rage. Jesse immediately moved to shield Queen Nora, his body tensing for action. Security forces rushed to contain the protesters, but one managed to break through. The man raised his arm, hurling a container of water directly at Queen Nora. Without hesitation, Jesse threw himself in front of the Queen. The water hit him full force, drenching his formal attire. The fabric clung to his muscular frame, outlining every contour of his body. Queen Nora, who had been watching the chaos unfold, found her gaze locked on Jesse. The sight of him, soaking wet and tensed for action, triggered a flood of memories from their time on her homeworld. Combined with her heightened pheromone production, the effect was overwhelming. As security finally managed to subdue the protesters, Jesse turned to Queen Nora. "Are you all right, Your Majesty?" he asked, his voice husky with concern. Queen Nora's compound eyes seemed to shimmer with an intensity Jesse had never seen before. "Yes, I'm fine," she clicked, her voice uncharacteristically unsteady. Sensing the Queen's distress, Jesse gently guided her away from the crowd, finding a secluded alcove where they could have a moment of privacy. As they stood there, hidden from the eyes of the other guests, The tension between them seemed to crackle in the air. "Jesse," Queen Nora began, her antennae quivering. "I—" Before she could finish, Jesse found himself leaning in, drawn by an irresistible force. Their lips met in a passionate, forbidden kiss, years of suppressed emotions finally breaking free. The moment was shattered by a startled gasp. They broke apart to find Ambassador Krell and President Rossi standing at the entrance to the alcove, their expressions a mix of shock and dismay. "What is the meaning of this?" Ambassador Krell demanded, his antennae rigid with anger. Jesse opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. He looked at Queen Nora, seeing his own conflicted emotions reflected in her compound eyes. The future of human-Nasat relations hung in the balance, and they had just thrown it into chaos with a single impulsive act. Their eyes met, a mixture of fear and longing evident in their gaze. Before either could speak, Ambassador Krell's voice cut through the tension. "This is unacceptable. You've jeopardized everything we've worked for." President Rossi, his face a mask of diplomatic neutrality, placed a hand on Krell's shoulder. "Let's not jump to conclusions, Ambassador. We should discuss this privately." As they were ushered away from the gala, Jesse's mind raced. He knew the consequences of his actions could be severe, but he couldn't bring himself to regret that moment with Queen Nora. In the days that followed, the incident at the gala became the center of a diplomatic firestorm. News of the kiss spread rapidly, fueling debates and protests across both Earth and the Nasat homeworld. Jesse found himself confined to his quarters, effectively under house arrest while the authorities decided how to handle the situation. It was during this tense period that an announcement came from the highest levels of both governments. An emergency summit would be held to address the future of human-Nasat relations. The chosen venue was a neutral space station orbiting Earth, carefully designed to accommodate both species. To Jesse's surprise, he received a summons to attend the summit as a key witness and participant in the events that had led to this crisis. As he boarded the shuttle that would take him to the space station, he couldn't help but wonder what awaited him. The space station was a marvel of engineering, its sleek design incorporating elements suitable for both humans and Nasat. As Jesse stepped off the shuttle, he was struck by the diverse crowd of delegates from both species, their chatter creating a cacophony of human voices and Nasat clicks. Dr. Leanna Sullivan approached Jesse as he made his way through the arrival area. Her eyes were bright with excitement, a stark contrast to the general atmosphere of tension. "Jesse, I need to speak with you privately," she said, pulling him aside. "I've made a breakthrough in my research on Queen Nora's transformation." In a quiet corner, Dr. Sullivan explained her findings. Queen Nora's adapted exoskeleton and enhanced pheromones aren't just a result of her molting process. They're signs of a rare Nasat evolutionary leap that occurs once every few millennia. Jesse's eyes widened as he processed this information. "What does that mean for us, for the relations between our species?" "It means," Dr. Sullivan replied, her voice low, "that this leap allows for greater interspecies compatibility. It's theorized to be a natural mechanism for Nasat to form alliances with other sentient races." Before Jesse could fully grasp the implications of this revelation, the summit officially began. The main conference room was divided into sections, with separate atmospheric controls to ensure comfort for both species. Jesse took his seat, acutely aware of the empty chair next to him where Queen Nora would soon sit. The debates were heated from the start. Conservative factions from both sides argued passionately for limited interaction, citing the potential dangers of cross-species relationships. Jesse listened as human and Nasat delegates alike used his actions as an example of the risks involved. However, progressive groups, emboldened by Dr. Sullivan's findings, pushed for closer integration and cultural exchange. They argued that the evolutionary leap observed in Queen Nora was a sign that their species were meant to coexist more closely. During a recess in the proceedings, Jesse managed to slip away from his handlers. He found Queen Nora in a quiet observation deck, her iridescent form silhouetted against the stars. "Your Majesty," he said softly, approaching her. Queen Nora turned, her compound eyes reflecting the starlight. "Jesse," she clicked, her voice carrying a note of warmth despite the formal setting. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of recent events hanging between them. Finally, Jessie spoke. Dr. Sullivan told me about her discovery, about your evolutionary leap. Queen Nora's antennae twitched. It's a lot to process, she admitted. The implications for our people. Before she could finish, an alarm blared throughout the station. Red warning lights flashed, and a computerized voice announced, Warning! Life support systems compromised. All personnel report to designated safety zones. Jessie and Queen Nora exchanged a look of alarm. Without a word, they rushed out of the observation deck and into the chaos of the main corridor. Delegates from both species were in a panic, some already showing signs of distress from the rapidly changing atmosphere. As they reached the central hub, Jessie spotted a familiar face on one of the security monitors. His blood ran cold as he recognized Marcus Graves, the anti-alien extremist from the aquarium incident, dressed in a maintenance uniform and tampering with a control panel. It's Graves, Jessie growled, pointing at the screen. He must have infiltrated the station's crew. Queen Nora's eyes narrowed. We need to stop him before he causes more damage. Jessie nodded, his training kicking in. I'll coordinate with the station's engineering team to stabilize the environment. Can you use your knowledge of Nasat physiology to help the affected delegates? Of course, Queen Nora replied, her regal bearing returning despite the crisis. As they split up to tackle their respective tasks, Jessie couldn't help but feel a surge of admiration for Queen Nora's ability to adapt to this Earth-like environment. It was a stark reminder of how far they'd come and how much was at stake. With alarms blaring and delegates in distress, Jessie raced towards the engineering section, determined to put an end to Graves' sabotage and salvage the summit that held the key to the future of human-Nasat relations. As he raced through the corridors, Jessie's mind was torn between the immediate crisis and the implications of Dr. Sullivan's revelation about Queen Nora's evolutionary leap. Pushing those thoughts aside, Jessie focused on the task at hand. He burst into the engineering section, quickly spotting Marcus Graves hunched over a control panel. Step away from the console, Graves, Jessie shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos of alarms and panicked voices. Graves spun around, his eyes wild with fanaticism. You don't understand. This alliance will be the death of humanity. Jessie inched closer, hands raised in a placating gesture. Let's talk about this. There's no need for anyone to get hurt. As Jessie engaged Graves in conversation, he surreptitiously signaled to the station's security team, who had finally caught up. In a swift, coordinated move, they subdued Graves while Jessie worked with the engineers to stabilize the life support systems. With the immediate threat neutralized, Jessie hurried back to the central hub. He found Queen Nora tending to a group of distressed delegates, her newfound adaptability allowing her to move seamlessly between the needs of humans and Nasat. Their eyes met across the room, and Jessie felt a jolt of electricity run through him. The events of the past few hours had only intensified the connection between them. As order was restored and the summit reconvened, Jessie and Queen Nora found themselves at the center of attention. Their actions during the crisis, coupled with Dr. Sullivan's research, had shifted the tone of the debates. Months passed, and the groundbreaking summit led to a series of agreements that would reshape human-Nasat relations. The most significant of these was the establishment of a joint research initiative, aimed at exploring the full potential of interspecies cooperation. Jessie stood at the viewport of the shuttle, watching as the terraformed moon orbiting Jupiter grew larger. The massive research facility that would be their home for the foreseeable future came into view. Its sleek architecture a testament to the combined ingenuity of human and Nasat engineers. Queen Nora moved to stand beside him, her iridescent exoskeleton shimmering in the starlight. It's beautiful, she clicked softly. Jessie nodded, acutely aware of her presence. The past months had been a whirlwind of debriefings, medical examinations, and preparations for this mission. Through it all, the tension between them had only grown stronger. As they disembarked, they were greeted by Dr. Elena Volkov and Zixna, the lead researchers for the project. Dr. Volkov, a tall woman with sharp features and piercing blue eyes, shook Jessie's hand firmly. "Welcome to Jupiter's Hope," she said, her voice carrying a hint of a Russian accent. "We're eager to begin our work." Zixina, the Nasat evolutionary biologist, clicked a greeting to Queen Nora. "Your Majesty, it's an honor to have you here. Your participation in this research is invaluable." The facility was a marvel of bioengineering, with sections tailored to both human and Nasat physiologies. As they toured the labs and living quarters, Jesse couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation mixed with trepidation. The first phase of tests began almost immediately. Jesse found himself subjected to a battery of examinations, from standard medical scans to more esoteric procedures designed to detect subtle changes in his biology. During one such examination, Dr. Volkov's eyes widened as she studied the results on her tablet. "This is unexpected," she murmured. "What is it?" Jesse asked, a note of concern in his voice. Dr. Volkov looked up, her expression a mix of excitement and disbelief. "Your body is producing trace amounts of a compound remarkably similar to the Nasat's waterproofing secretion. It's as if your physiology is adapting to prolonged exposure to Queen Nora." In an adjacent lab, Zixna was making equally startling discoveries about Queen Nora's evolved exoskeleton. The Nasat scientist's antennae quivered with excitement as she explained her findings to the Queen. "Your Majesty, the microstructures in your exoskeleton have continued to evolve. They're now capable of much more efficient gas exchange in Earth-like atmospheres. This adaptation will allow you to spend even longer periods out of water without discomfort." As the days turned into weeks, Jesse and Queen Nora found themselves participating in increasingly intimate experiments. They were asked to spend time together in various simulated environments, from Earth-like settings to aquatic Nasat habitats. During one such test, they were placed in a chamber designed to mimic the conditions of a Nasat underwater city. Jesse marveled at the bioluminescent algae that provided soft, ethereal lighting and the intricate coral-like structures that formed the walls and furnishings. As they explored the simulated city, Jesse became acutely aware of Queen Nora's proximity. The way her exoskeleton shimmered in the gentle light, the graceful movements of her antennae. It all served to heighten the attraction he had been struggling to suppress. Suddenly, alarms blared, and the chamber shuddered. A computerized voice announced, "Warning, environmental control malfunction. Pressure increasing rapidly." Jesse and Queen Nora exchanged a look of alarm. The water level in the chamber began to rise at an alarming rate, forcing them to retreat to a small air pocket near the ceiling. As they huddled together in the shrinking space, Jesse could feel Queen Nora's exoskeleton pressed against him. The stress of the situation, combined with their heightened physiological responses to each other, created an electric tension between them. Queen Nora's compound eyes met Jesse's gaze, and in that moment, all pretense of professional distance crumbled. They came together in a passionate embrace, their bodies intertwining as the simulated world around them faded into insignificance. The kiss was unlike anything Jesse had ever experienced. Alien, yet intoxicatingly familiar. He could taste the faint saltiness of Queen Nora's exoskeleton, feel the gentle brush of her antennae against his face. As suddenly as it had begun, the malfunction was corrected. The water level receded, and the chamber's door slid open to reveal Dr. Volkov and Zixna, their expressions a mix of concern and scientific curiosity. Jesse and Queen Nora separated, both acutely aware of the implications of what had just transpired. As they were led from the chamber, still dripping wet, Jesse caught Dr. Volkov and Zixna exchanging significant looks. In the aftermath of the incident, Jesse and Queen Nora were subjected to a new round of tests. Blood samples were taken, brain scans were performed, and they were questioned extensively about their physical and emotional responses during the malfunction. As they sat in the facility's communal area later that evening, Jesse couldn't shake the feeling that everything had changed. Queen Nora's antennae twitched nervously as she spoke. "Jesse, what happened in that chamber?" "We can't ignore it," she clicked softly. Jesse nodded, his heart racing. "I know, but what does it mean for us? For the research?" Before Queen Nora could respond, Dr. Volkov approached their table, her tablet in hand and a serious expression on her face. "We need to talk," she said, her tone grave. "The ethics board has made a decision about the future of our research, and it directly involves both of you." Jesse and Queen Nora exchanged a look, knowing that whatever came next would have far-reaching consequences, not just for them, but for the future of human-Nasat relations. Their eyes met, tension crackling between them as Dr. Volkov's words hung in the air. "What kind of decision?" Jesse asked, his voice tight with apprehension. Dr. Volkov took a deep breath. "The ethics board has approved an unprecedented series of experiments to explore the full extent of human-Nasat physiological compatibility. You two will be at the center of this study." Queen Nora's antennae twitched. "What exactly does that entail, Dr. Volkov?" "It means we'll be pushing the boundaries of our understanding," Dr. Volkov explained. "We'll be conducting tests that involve prolonged periods of close physical contact between you two in various controlled environments." Jesse felt his heart rate increase. The prospect of spending more time in close proximity to Queen Nora both thrilled and terrified him. Over the next few weeks, Jesse and Queen Nora found themselves subjected to increasingly intensive experiments. They were placed in specially designed chambers that simulated a wide range of environments, from the depths of Nasat oceans to the arid landscapes of Earth's deserts. One particularly grueling test placed them in a chamber that rapidly alternated between terrestrial and aquatic settings. Jesse gasped as water suddenly filled the room, forcing him to rely on Queen Nora's guidance to navigate the alien environment. "Stay close to me," Queen Nora clicked, her voice clear despite the rushing water. Jesse felt her exoskeleton brush against his skin as she helped him find air pockets. As the chamber drained and refilled repeatedly, Jesse noticed something strange. His skin had taken on a faint iridescent sheen, reminiscent of Queen Nora's exoskeleton. More surprisingly, he found himself able to hold his breath for increasingly longer periods underwater. Queen Nora, too, was changing. Her new exoskeleton seemed to retain moisture more efficiently, allowing her to function comfortably in the Earth-like settings for extended periods. "Fascinating," Dr. Volkov murmured, observing them through a monitoring screen. "Their bodies are adapting to each other's native environments." As news of these developments spread, the research facility became a hive of activity. Journalists and documentary crews descended upon Jupiter's moon, their cameras and microphones constantly trained on Jesse and Queen Nora. The pressure of constant scrutiny began to wear on them. One evening, after a particularly invasive interview, Jesse found Queen Nora in their shared living space, her antennae drooping with exhaustion. "Are you okay?" he asked, approaching her cautiously. Queen Nora's compound eyes fixed on him. "I'm not sure, Jesse. This isn't what I expected when I agreed to participate in this research." Jesse nodded, understanding her frustration. "I know. It's a lot to handle." Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent message from Dr. Volkov. "We need you both in the main lab immediately. There's been a development." When they arrived, they found Dr. Volkov and Zixna huddled around a display, their faces grave. "What's going on?" Jesse asked. Dr. Volkov looked up, her expression tense. "We've received reports of coordinated attacks on research facilities on Earth and the Nasat homeworld. It appears to be the work of extremists led by Marcus Graves." Queen Nora's antennae stood rigid with alarm. "What are their demands?" "They want to destroy all data related to human-Nasat compatibility," Zixina clicked. "They claim our research threatens the genetic purity of both species." Jesse's military instincts kicked in. "We need to secure the facility. They might come here next." As they rushed to implement heightened security measures, alarms blared throughout the complex. A computerized voice announced, "Warning, unidentified vessel approaching at high speed." Jesse and Queen Nora exchanged a look of grit. They knew what they had to do. "I have an idea," Jesse said, his mind racing. "We can use the facility's environmental systems as a defense mechanism. Flood some sections with water to slow them down, create Earth-like conditions in others to challenge any Nasat extremists." Queen Nora nodded, her eyes gleaming with approval. "I can use my enhanced abilities to manipulate the water systems. Let's do it." As they prepared for the impending attack, Jesse and Queen Nora found themselves alone in a control room. The weight of the moment pressed upon them, bringing their feelings for each other into sharp focus. Without a word, they came together in an embrace. Jesse marveled at how perfectly their bodies seemed to fit together, despite their different physiologies. He could feel the smooth coolness of Queen Nora's exoskeleton against his skin, her antennae gently brushing his face. "Whatever happens," Queen Nora clicked softly, "we face it together?" Jesse nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "Together," he agreed. They separated reluctantly, moving to their defensive positions as the unidentified ship drew nearer. Jesse's hand hovered over the environmental controls, ready to flood the lower levels. Queen Nora stood poised to direct the water flow with her newfound abilities. As the ship began its final approach, Jesse and Queen Nora braced themselves for the fight ahead. The fate of their relationship, their groundbreaking research, and the future of human-Nasat relations hung in the balance. But in that moment, as they stood side by side, they knew they were ready to face whatever came next. Their way. The tension in the control room was palpable as the unidentified ship drew closer to the Jupiter Moon facility. Jesse's hand hovered over the environmental controls, his muscles taut with anticipation. Queen Nora stood beside him, her antennae quivering slightly as she focused on the water systems. "Now!" Jesse shouted, slamming his palm onto the control panel. The facility came alive with a cacophony of sounds as water rushed through pipes and atmospheric regulators whirred to life. Jesse watched the monitors intently, manipulating the controls to flood key sections of the complex while creating challenging Earth-like conditions in others. Queen Nora's eyes glazed over slightly as she tapped into her newfound abilities. With a series of clicks and chirps, she directed the flow of water, creating powerful currents and barriers throughout the facility. The ship docked with a resounding clang that echoed through the complex. Moments later, alarms blared as the intruders breached the outer airlock. "It's Marcus Graves," Dr. Volkov's voice crackled over the intercom. "He's leading a team of human and Nasat extremists." Jesse and Queen Nora exchanged a determined look. "We're ready," Jesse replied, his voice steady. They watched on the security feeds as Graves and his team entered the facility, immediately encountering the maze of alternating aquatic and terrestrial environments. The intruders' progress slowed considerably as they struggled to navigate the constantly changing conditions. Jesse tapped his earpiece. "Dr. Volkov, Zixna, how's the data transfer coming?" "We're working as fast as we can," Zixna clicked back. "The underwater server with Nasat bioencryption is our best chance to protect the research." As Graves and his team penetrated deeper into the facility, Jesse and Queen Nora moved to intercept them. They made their way through the winding corridors, seamlessly transitioning between flooded sections and Earth-like areas. Jesse marveled at how natural it felt to swim through the water-filled passages, his newly enhanced physiology allowing him to move with ease. Beside him, Queen Nora's adapted exoskeleton gave her increased mobility in the terrestrial sections. They reached the central research lab just as Graves and his team burst through the doors. Water sloshed around their feet, creating a surreal battlefield of metal and moisture. "Stop right there, Graves," Jesse called out, his voice firm. Graves sneered, his eyes darting between Jesse and Queen Nora. "Look at you two, the perfect little lab experiments. You're an abomination, a threat to the purity of both our species." Queen Nora's antennae twitched in agitation. "You're wrong, Graves. Our differences make us stronger, not weaker." "Can't you see what we've achieved here?" Jesse added, gesturing to the room around them. "We're breaking down barriers, creating understanding between our species." Graves scoffed, but Jesse noticed a flicker of uncertainty in some of his followers' eyes. He pressed on. "Think about the possibilities, the advancements we could make together. This isn't about becoming obsolete, it's about evolving, growing stronger as a united force." Queen Nora chimed in, her click soft but clear. "In Nasat culture, we have a saying, the strongest current is formed by many streams. Our unity doesn't erase our individuality, it enhances it." Their words seemed to give pause to some of Graves' team. Murmurs of doubt rippled through the group, and Jesse saw their chance. With a subtle nod to Queen Nora, they sprang into action. Queen Nora raised her arms and the water around them surged into a swirling vortex. The sudden movement disoriented Graves and his team, giving Jesse the opening he needed. He lunged forward, using his enhanced agility to weave through the confusion. In a matter of seconds, he reached Graves and swiftly disarmed him. But as Jesse grappled with Graves, the extremist leader's hand slipped, accidentally activating a device on his belt. A high-pitched whine filled the air, and sparks erupted from the walls. "No!" Graves shouted, his eyes wide with panic. "That was meant to destroy the research data." The facility shuddered violently, and alarms blared anew. A computerized voice announced, "Critical malfunction in environmental systems. Air pressure dropping. Water tank integrity compromised." Jesse's military training kicked in. "We need to evacuate now," he shouted over the din. Without hesitation, Jesse and Queen Nora began guiding everyone out of the lab, extremists included. They split up, with Jesse leading groups through the terrestrial sections while Queen Nora navigated the rapidly flooding aquatic areas. As they worked to save everyone in the facility, Jesse couldn't help but notice the looks of awe and confusion on the faces of Graves' followers. The seamless cooperation between human and Nasat, the concern for all lives, regardless of ideology, seemed to be having a profound impact. The evacuation was nearly complete when a violent tremor shook the facility. Jesse, Queen Nora, and Graves found themselves cut off from the others in the central chamber. "The last escape pod is just through there," Jesse shouted over the groaning of stressed metal, pointing to a nearby airlock. They raced towards it, water rising rapidly around them. As they reached the pod, a harsh reality became clear. The life support system could only sustain 2 passengers for the journey to safety. Jesse and Queen Nora exchanged a look, a silent agreement passing between them. But before they could act, Graves stepped forward, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. "Go," he said, his voice barely audible over the alarms. "I was wrong about you, about all of this. Don't let my mistake be the end of everything you've worked for." Before Jesse or Queen Nora could protest, Graves shoved them into the pod and slammed his hand on the launch controls. As the airlock sealed, the last thing they saw was Graves' resigned smile as the facility began to crumble around him. The escape pod shot away from the disintegrating research complex, carrying Jesse and Queen Nora to safety. As they watched the facility implode through the small viewport, a heavy silence fell between them. Finally, Queen Nora's antenna gently brushed against Jesse's cheek. "We did it," she clicked softly. "But at what cost?" Jesse took her hand in his, marveling at how natural it felt despite their physiological differences. "We'll make sure it wasn't in vain," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "This is just the beginning." As the pod streaked through space, heading toward the nearest outpost, Jesse and Queen Nora held each other close. They had saved the research and demonstrated the power of human-Nasat cooperation, but the real work was yet to come. The future of both their species now rested in their hands, a responsibility as daunting as it was exhilarating.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.